Om Aganatimirandasyanganangana Sarakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tashmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanyamanobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupakadamayam Darati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamanam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivishikam Sham Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagatpade Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namosade Jayatam Sarito Pango Mahamadir Matir Giti Matsavasha Parambo Radhana Madana Mohanam Sriman Rasa Rasaram Vivam Sivana Karsan Venershan Upago Gopinata Sri Saram Divyad Brindana Nikapa Drumada Srimad Radnagara Shima Shanishto Shri Sri Radha Shila Govanda Prestadabihi Sevamano Shmarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Chajigadi Taya Krishnaya Govinaya Namo Namah Mangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Garuda Jaja Mangalam Paridikaksho Mangaraya Tanohari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Pachodhyate Om Mahadevi Chavidnahi Vishnu Padnicha Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Pachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastubhyam Sare Sari Hari Pre Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Dayadini Tapta Kanchana Gonagir Hari Vindavaneshari Vishavana Sute Devi Pranamani Hari Pre Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasnaya Bhutare Srimari Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sunivadi Praskita De Satarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Transcendental Tuesday. Thanks for joining us on Zoom, Rob. Thanks for stopping by in the afternoon on your way to Fillmore so we could chat for a while, catch up. We will see you tomorrow at the temple in Salt Lake City for the Janmashtami celebrations, Wednesday, September 6th. That is the day that commemorates the appearance of the Lord on this planet 5,300 years ago. And our biggest celebration in Utah is always held up in Salt Lake City because that's the nearest to the population density there. So it begins at 7 o'clock. There'll be a gala dance performance from 8 to 9 by Divya Narayan. We're also going to take time out to break the pot, commemorate Krishna's making a pyramid from amongst his friends, climbing on top of the pyramid and breaking the pot of yogurt called the Dahi Handi. There'll be a short talk by myself about the significance of the day, but mostly lots of kirtan, a sacred bathing ceremony. There are Kalash sponsorships available for $301 or $501. You get to bathe the deities first and to take those beautiful Kalashes home as a commemoration of the day as well. That'll be up in Salt Lake City tomorrow from 7 until midnight. We'll also be open later in Spanish Fork. We'll have a skeleton crew here of Radhika Raman and Radhe Sham, who will keep the temple open a little later than 8 o'clock, have the buffet open a little later than its normal 6 o'clock, in case people want to visit the Spanish Fork Temple on this holy day. Otherwise, we will have an observance on Sunday in conjunction with our 5 o'clock Sunday feast, during which, again, Divya Narayan and some of her top students will come and present a wonderful dance performance in the Spanish Fork Temple Room, and we'll have a short bathing ceremony as well for those who'd like to come Sundays at 5 o'clock in Spanish Fork. Thanks for joining us on Facebook. Sundari Priya is our main organizer. She's been busy preparing things up there in Salt Lake City. We had a crew of people to help do a thorough cleansing of the temple yesterday. They had a huge shopping spree over the weekend to buy all the ingredients and all the paper goods needed for the event. There was cooking, I think, yesterday on the part of Surjit Prabhu. I'm going up with the food trailer this afternoon and bringing some of our frozen vegetables here from our garden to augment the huge feast. All of it's happening tomorrow night in Salt Lake City. Thanks for joining us, Brent. Thanks for joining us. John Malik, thanks for joining us. Gene Eskelson as well. And thanks to those who might jump on the call later on or even listen to it as it's posted on both YouTube and Facebook. Just to catch up, yesterday we talked about the elaborate descriptions in the beginning of the second chapter of the 8th canto of the Bhagavatam of the Trikuta mountain range, how beautiful it is. The descriptions of this heavenly atmospheric lake and the surrounding mountains, as well as the flowers, trees, puts to shame even our most exotic places of this material world. I have a program, a software program on my treadmill where I can go on a walk or run anywhere in the world I want. It shows on a little screen right in front of you, it shows the paths and the roadsides, the beaches and the mountains. And I've been doing Hawaii for the last couple of weeks, take one jog or one walk in Hawaii. I think Hawaii is pretty much as close to a heavenly planet as we have here on Earth. And yet, just go ahead and go to the 8th canto, beginning of the Gajendra pastimes, and read the descriptions of the Trikuta mountain area in which Gajendra was sporting with his wives. And you have to admit that all the beautiful places, including Hawaii, Costa Rica, et cetera, are defeated by the beauty of the Trikuta mountains in the heavenly planets. We don't really have anything on Earth at that level. Now, why would there be so much time? This is the most sacred, the holiest of all holy scriptures. And granted, it's nice to read about the heavenly planets, but why would so much time and why would so many verses be taken up describing this? Why not get right to the story, get to the point of it all? 3 reasons. We touched on these yesterday. Reading the Bhagavatam is not like reading a novel where you want to read it from the beginning to end. Oftentimes the criterion, if someone wants to recommend a novel to you, a fictitious novel, they'll recommend it by telling you, I couldn't put it down. I stayed up all night reading it. Isn't that pretty much the highest recommendation you get for a novel? But the Bhagavatam's not like that. You don't read it and put it aside. That fictitious novel that hit the bestseller list that you couldn't put down, you read through it in one reading, you're not going to read it the next day and the next day and the next day. You're not going to go and read it in one sitting anytime soon, because you know what happened. All the secrets are unveiled. There's really very little that attracts you to come back to that novel. Maybe after 10 years, when you've forgotten all the details of the plot, you'll go back and revisit it. But there's no way you'll revisit that on a daily basis. The Bhagavatam is different. Bhagavatam is the spiritual world. We are conditioned materially. Since time immemorial, we've been associating with matter. We've identified with our race, with our gender, with our ethnicity. And we have to get out of that pattern of thinking. We have to cleanse the heart, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, and revive our original Krishna consciousness. The process is repeatedly hearing the Bhagavatam. We originated in the spiritual world. We're all parts and parcels of Krishna. On the famous Transcendental album, Prabhupada says, I think he's quoting his spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta, quote, we are all originally Krishna conscious living entities. What does that mean? It means we came from the spiritual world. We might have been immature, we might have been embryonic, we might not have been fully developed emotionally, culturally, intellectually, and that's the reason why we left the spiritual world for some unfathomable reason, but we did originate with Krishna in the spiritual world. So we need to repeatedly hear the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is in itself the appearance of the spiritual world in sound vibration within this dark material world. Just like if you have dirt on a mirror, the dirt has encrusted itself for many, many years. Now, you don't remove that dirt with just one swipe of the cloth. It takes repeated application, repeated cleansing before the Dirt is removed from the surface of the mirror, begins to reveal an accurate reflection. And even after you cleanse the past dirt from the mirror, you have to daily bring out your cloth and clean it on a regular basis to keep more dirt from accumulating. After all, that was the problem in the first place, neglect. The Bhagavatam is meant to be heard repeatedly, and there's nothing in there which is extraneous, because it's not about learning what the plot is. It's not about finding out what happened. It's an ongoing process of cleansing the heart. And even after the heart is cleansed, the subject matter is so compelling, so nectarine, that even after liberation, great saints and sages continue to go over and over these verses of the Bhagavatam. And if you read the commentaries of the great realized souls like Vishwanath Chakravarti and Baladev Vidyabhushan, the very areas in which the mundaners seem to have the least interest are the areas of most interest to the liberated souls. The mundaners, we just want to know what happened. We want to know what the storyline is. We'll jump over the prayers. We'll jump over the ancestry. We'll jump over the descriptions of the landscape to get to the storyline, to get to the plot. But if you read the commentaries of the great realized sages, they spend more time. They have more to say about the ancestry, about the landscape, about the environment, about the prayers of the demigods, the prayers of Lord Shiva, the prayers of Lord Brahma, the prayers of Narada Muni. These are the areas of the Bhagavatam that quicken their interests more than the storyline itself. Now here we have many verses describing the Trikuta mountain. Why? Three primary reasons. We touched upon these yesterday. This is a place where Krishna called out to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Any place where a devotee calls out in devotion, in affection, for the help of the Supreme Personality of God is a place that needs to be described. The second reason the descriptions are there is because this is also a place where Gajendra's consciousness went from a pinpoint, expanded, and became Krishna conscious. He went from totally pinpointing on his senses, his body, his bodily connections. He went from dot consciousness to Krishna consciousness. And the sequence was bhakti. First of all, he's only interested in stimulating his senses of his body. Then his sense enjoyment was interrupted, challenged, terminated by Shakti, the battle that he engaged in with the crocodile, matter of life and death. Eventually, after initially praying to the Lord to free him from the jaws of the crocodile, he gave up that desire. He actually no longer wanted to be freed from the jaws of the crocodile. He didn't want to continue on in the body of an elephant. He asked the Lord, let me give up this body, because it is a body steeped in ignorance. And what he prayed, how his prayers evolved were, rather than being liberated as an elephant physically from the crocodile, which has clamped onto my leg, let me be liberated from the crocodile of ignorance, which has had its jaws on my consciousness for far too long. And that's mukti, that desire for liberation from material entanglement, rebirth, that is called mukti. And yet it's still not the highest level. Gajendra comes to the highest level. Why is it that he no longer wants to continue his life as an elephant? Why is it that he asks to be free from the crocodile of ignorance in this material world, so that he can resume his eternal position as loving devotional servant of the Lord? Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Karanai Shavanadi Sudha Chitikari Odai. He prays ultimately in a mood of bhakti, which is the highest evolution of consciousness of which a human being is capable. He prays, Lord, please engage me in your devotional service. Please give me the knowledge of the soul, the super soul, the connection between the two. Let me be free from the covering and the inhibitions of ignorance, so that I can wholeheartedly engage in your devotional service. Similarly, in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was within the jaws of the crocodile ignorance. He saw the Kauravas as his relatives, his teachers, his friends. He hesitated to raise his hand in combat against them because of that bodily connection. At that point, you might say he's under the influence within the jaws of the crocodile of material existence. However, after Krishna poured the 700 instructional verses of the Bhagavad Gita into Arjuna, he no longer suffered from ignorance. You might say the head of the crocodile was cut off by the chakra of Krishna's words. At that point, Arjuna was free of his disability. He was free of his paralysis. He was free of ignorance. He was free of bodily attachment. And then he declared himself, Nashtam Mohashmita Tadprashadam. Now I've regained my original Krishna conscious. I have thrown off the ignorance, which has kept me clamped in its jaws lifetime after lifetime. And now, without any reservations, without any scruples or hesitations, Lord, I wholeheartedly re-engage myself in devotional service. So the evolution of consciousness, the place where the Lord was appealed to helplessly by his devotee, is one reason why the Trikut mountain is described. The second reason is that this is a place where there was a evolution from the lowest point of consciousness to the highest point of consciousness. And that's certainly a place that's worth describing. And last is, because the Lord did appear in response to the prayers of Gajendra, he appeared as Hari, the Manvantari for that particular age, riding on the back of Garuda, wielding his razor-sharp disc, separated, in fact, the head of the crocodile from its body, and rescued his devotee. That makes Trikuta a dham. It makes it a special place which deserves to be described and celebrated throughout the entire three worlds. Another reason, a fourth reason why the heavenly planets are being described. And again, if you read the descriptions, there's nothing, even in Hawaii, even in Costa Rica, of all the places that I've gone in my iFit program for walks. Of course, Hawaii, I think, is justifiably number one. Another beautiful place is obviously Costa Rica. Within Europe, Italy has so many beautiful walks around Lake Como and other places. Portugal has some beautiful, beautiful areas. But none of these places can come close to the description of the areas on the heavenly planets where those who are pious love to engage in pastimes. And yet we are told that far more beautiful, just as nothing in Hawaii can approach the descriptions of Trikuta Mountain, which is in the material world, it's just on a higher plane than we're at. Then can you just imagine that if even in this material world, there are heavenly places which are so enchanting and so beautiful as a Trikuta Mountain, imagine how much more enchanting, beautiful, and gorgeous, awesome are the planets of the blue Narayan, the Vaikuntha planets of the spiritual world. Just imagine the opulence, the beauty, the enrichment. And if the Vaikuntha planets are so much more beautiful than the heavenly planets, then what to speak of the highest planet in the spiritual world, which is called Krishna Loka. The Vaikuntha planets are marked by palaces, opulence, beyond the furthest imagination of any of us here, or even in the heavenly planets. The Krishna planet is even more opulent than the Vaikuntha planets because there are no overt, ostentatious shows of wealth. The wealth is in the love. The wealth is the prema, which saturates each and every atom in the spiritual world. Divyad Vrindana and Kalpadrumara Srimad Radhagara Shri Radha Srila Govinda Prashtalabihi Sevamana Shmarami. This is a picture which is painted of the spiritual world. Radha and Krishna, Radha Govinda are seated on a jula. They're seated on a swing. In fact, the swing festival is going on right now in temples all over the world. And they're being attended to by their gopis. Some are fanning them with a peacock feather. Some are doing chama. Some are they're offering them perfume. Some of them are flower garlands. Some of them are dancing for the pleasure of their lordships. Some of them are singing for the pleasure of your lordship. Some of them are offering prayers. There are elaborate, tasteful arrangements made by Vrinda Devi within the groves of Vrindavan for the pleasure of Radha and Krishna. And even though there are no palaces described, there's not any opulence particularly referred to. If you look at the verse carefully, it says that the tree under which Radha and Krishna are being pushed in their swing is a kalpavriksha. That means it is a divine wish-fulfilling desire tree that can give the petitioner anything you ask for, provided it's to be used in the service of Krishna. You can't ask the wish-fulfilling desire tree for something which has nothing to do with Krishna's service. It will not fulfill it. But if it's to be used in the service of Krishna, from a single tree, you can get a drum, you can get a pair of hand cymbals, you get a harmonium, you can get the raw ingredients for a meal, you can get the cooked ingredients for a meal, you can get a transportation to go to a program. Whatever it is that within your imagination you can think of to serve Krishna, you don't have to build a factory, you don't have to earn money, you don't have to get wages, you don't have to pay sales tax. All you have to do is go to the desire tree and ask for it. And if your desire is sincere to use that byproduct for the service of Krishna, the tree will give it to you. Prabhupada said the trees of this material world can only give one particular food of one particular description. From an apple tree, and even that it's only seasonally. You can't get apples from an apple tree year-round. You can only get apples from an apple tree during certain seasons. Not too long ago, we had a volunteer come to us from Asheville, North Carolina, former nurse. Asheville is a warmer climate than we are. It has a much longer growing season than we do. I imagine 8 months a year, if not longer, you can grow things in Asheville, North Carolina. So she read our description that we have an organic garden, we have an organic, mostly organic buffet. And she came from Asheville, North Carolina with all these high, unrealistic expectations that everything here would be homegrown, year-round, 12 months a year, organic. Now, that was a little unrealistic. I don't know what she was thinking. We have a growing season in Utah that starts from end of May, middle of May, May 17th, and it's coming to an end now by end of September. First, we got zucchinis of various descriptions. We got squash, we got corn, and then right now we got cucumber, tons and tons of cucumbers. Our freezers are full of zucchini and cucumbers and raita. Now we're getting eggplants, we're getting green peppers, we're getting tomatoes, we're getting cantaloupes, we're getting watermelons. But by the end of September, we won't be getting much of anything. So the growing season, June, July, August, September, is 4 months. But remember, you don't get anything in June. You just have your seedlings from the greenhouse. You start getting end of July, August, and September. So it's really just like 2 months when you're actually producing anything. And we produce tons. Make no mistake about it. You would not believe how much produce we produce here in less than an acre of gardening. It is staggering. It is unbelievable. But yet at the same time, we have 8 or 10 people to feed every day. In addition, we have 10 to 20 people for the buffet, which is open 7 days a week. And especially during the summer months, we could feed 100 or 150 people at the buffet. And every day throughout the year, there are byproducts of our garden, zucchini, green pepper, dishes, melons cut up, and so on and so forth. So considering that we feed so many people during the course of a year, 365 days a year, as well as our staff, we have so many tourists to feed. And considering that we have the buffet open, and then we have festivals, we have huge festivals like the Festival of Colors, where we'll do 1,000 plates, many of those plates organic produce. So she comes here, and she gets all bummed out and writes us a negative review on WUFA because everything is not organic, she says. Everything is not grown in our gardens. In fact, she was here at a time early in the season when really all we're getting was some lettuce and spinach. So she says they claim that everything's organic. At the same time, when I was here, all that was going in the buffet was lettuce and spinach. Okay, well, how unrealistic, how out of touch reality can you be? We do the best we can. And even granted that not everything all throughout the 12 months of the year on the buffet, on the salad bar, is a byproduct of our own garden. In fact, it's only like 3 or 4 months in the summer that we have our own cucumbers, we have our own green peppers, we have our own salad, we have our own spinach, we have hot items in the buffet as these things are being harvested, cleaned, cut up, and cooked. We're doing a pretty darn good job considering we live in Utah. Now, if you were living in the Big Island, Hawaii, yeah, you could practically speaking have fresh organic produce from your garden on the table every single day. But that's still not to say that most of what we serve is not organic, because pretty much everything in the produce section in Costco is organic. But what we don't grow here, we get organic produce from Costco. So anyway, enough about that. Enough about that. So in the spiritual world, you get from the wish-fulfilling desire trees anything you want. From a single tree, you can get apples, you can get pears, you can get peaches, you can get avocados, you can get mangoes, you can get papayas. From that tree, you can get cauliflowers, you can get broccoli, you can get cucumber, you can get cantaloupe, you can get watermelons, you can get whatever you want, you can get from that tree. In this material world, you can only get a specific fruit, a specific vegetable from a specific plant, and then only it's generally for a short period of time. So if the Trikuta mountain in the heavenly planets, one of the heavenly planets, is so mind-bogglingly beautifully described, then how much more beautiful are going to be the Vaikuntha planets on which the four-handed Narayan resides? How much beautiful than that is going to be Goloka Vrindavan, the highest and largest planet of the spiritual world, which is the personal abode of Radha and Krishna. And even beyond that, how much is not the word, how beautiful, how surpassingly transcendental and supernatural would be the groves of Vrindavan, where Radha and Krishna sit on a jeweled throne underneath a desire tree, the roots of which are studded with valuable jewels. This is the area to which the Lord appeared. This is the area which witnessed the evolution of consciousness of Gajendra the elephant. And this is the area in which he offered his heartfelt prayers in a mood of helplessness. We asked these hypothetical questions in the past. I'll repeat them. Throughout history, since the whole history of the world and all the planets throughout all the vast periods of time, how many elephants do you think taking a drink by the banks of the river got their legs clamped upon by the jaws of a crocodile? Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, throughout all of history and on all the planets. Must have happened over and over. Animals are particularly vulnerable when they go for water. Now, predators generally hang around watering holes, areas where prey are known to come to quench their thirst. And when the prey is at their most unsuspecting, they're most vulnerable, when they're weak from lack of water and drinking in that water, that's when you hit them. How many times must that have happened? That kind of an interaction occurred between elephants and crocodiles in the history of the world. Another example, Draupadi was a married lady, and she was laid hands upon by the cruel and ignorant, lusty Dusasan and jeered by Duryodhana. Again, ask yourself the question, how many hundreds, if not thousand times, unfortunately, it's unfortunate, but we know it's happened repeatedly in the history of the world, that a chaste, faithful lady has been laid hands on by someone who wants to ravish her. How many times in history, how many hundreds of thousands of times has the elephant's leg been grabbed by a crocodile? How many hundreds of thousands of times, unfortunately, has a chaste married lady been laid hands upon by someone not her husband with the most nefarious of motives? And yet, how many of those elephants, how many of those ladies do we read about in the pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam? only Gajendra and only Draupadi. It would seem to be such an easy thing to call out in helplessness, to give up all reliance on your own strength and just call out on all reliance on your relatives, all reliance on your bank balance, all reliance on your political party, and just put your hands up in the air and just call out to Krishna, or put your trunk up in the air with a lotus flower, call out to Krishna. It seems to be the most easy, obvious, and simple thing to do in the world. And yet we only find throughout all of cosmic history, 2 living entities did it. Gajendra the elephant and Draupadi, which means that although it's in one sense completely obvious that Krishna is totally accessible, it's not a cheap or a common thing to find that in moments of life-threatening crisis, one reverts to calling helplessly upon the Lord. Devotee once asked Prabhupada, how long does it take on the average to become Krishna conscious? Prabhupada said 40 years. 40 years of diligently chanting your rounds, eating only prasadam, reading the Bhagavatam on a daily basis, discussing and associating with devotees. But in another sense, it only needs to take a second, because all that's required is to call out in helplessness to the Supreme Personality of God. Gajendra and Draupadi were quite obviously, in dire circumstances. Everybody would acknowledge that they were in a very, very dangerous zone. But what we fail to realize, each and every one of us, that we're always in a dangerous zone. Like Gajendra said, his realization was, the croc is not just grabbing my leg now at this point in time on this date, on a summer day and whatever year it is. The crocodile has always had a hold of my leg. The crocodile ignorance has always had its jaws around me since time immemorial, throughout hundreds of thousands of reincarnations. Each and every one of us is in deep trouble at every single moment. It's only certain times we realize it. We think we've got everything under control. We think we've got it covered. We think that if we get into trouble, then we'll call Krishna in and Krishna will save us. What we don't realize is that we're always in trouble. We're in a deep, dark pit. Your family can't save you. Your bank balance can't save you. Your relatives can't save you. Your name in the newspaper can't save you. The demigods can't save you. Nobody can save you but Krishna. Nobody can save you but Krishna. Krishna is compared to a kite, which is manipulated on a string. If you look at a kite, Makara Sankranti, the 14th of January, the time when the sun changes from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. No, the northern hemisphere, the southern, is a festival of flying kites in India. Makara Sankranti is a big, big kite festival. Everybody goes out and they fly their kites. You look at those kites up in the sky, and it seems like they're just flying on their own out there. It seems like those kites are completely independent. And some kites are more dexterous. They're doing more difficult maneuvers, swoops and dives and turns, and other kites are less so. But it seems like each kite has its own independence, has its own mind, and it has its own set of maneuvers that it's very good at performing in the sky. However, if you look closer, you'll see that every kite is controlled by a string. It seems that the kite is uncontrolled. It seems it's independent. But the fact is that every kite is controlled by a string, and the string is manipulated by the kite flyer. In this analogy, the Lord is compared to the kite, and he is independent of Vigna Sharat. Nobody tells the Lord what to do, not Shiva, not Brahma, not Indra, not Vayu. There isn't any personality equal in power and influence to Krishna. It is said, Ekala Ishvara Krishna Ara Sabhibrita. There is one supreme controller, and everybody else, including Brahma, Shiva, and all the demigods and the powerful controllers of the planet, they are all servants of Krishna, that supreme independent personality of Godhead Nevertheless, in spite of his autonomy, in spite of his omnipotency, he says, Aham bhakta parani hyashatanta shadabarusha bhaktir bhaktir janapana. If you look closer, you look actually into the mind of the Lord, you look at what the Lord will admit to in confidence, that supremely independent Lord, out of fear of whom the sun rises, the wind blows, death goes chasing everyone, the tides go in and out of fear of him. Madbayat bhativantinam suristapade vaisana mritus charity angaya. Everything is working out of fear of the Lord. Everybody performs their duties punctiliously, diligently, scrupulously, out of fear of displeasing the Lord. That supreme controller who controls everyone and is not controlled by anyone reveals to us in confidence that he allows himself. He's not forced to, but he allows himself. He exercises the option of being controlled by the love of his devotees. The Lord's like the kite in the air, and the devotee on the ground with the string is the one who controls the devotee. And what is the string? The string are the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It is said that that supreme Lord, that totally independent, omnipotent personality of Godhead, takes not a step without the sanction of his pure devotees. He's known as Bhakta Gan. He doesn't go anywhere unless it has to do with his pure devotees. Elsewhere, Prabhupada said Krishna has no name. Krishna himself has no name, but he has millions of names, each and every one of which celebrates his connection with his devotees. Devaki Nandana, Nanda Nandana, Parsarati, Madhava. All the names of the Lord are not his names separately, independently. They're names of the Lord in relationship, in connection with his devotees, without whom the Lord will not take a step. Good example of this, and we'll finish with this story in the last 5 or 6 minutes here. You may have heard the story, which is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, of Shakshi Gopal in Orissa state. There was a young man and an older Brahmin who happened to set up at the same time on pilgrimage to Vrindavan, which is about 1,000 miles away. So the young man, seeing the vulnerability of the elderly man, offered to partner with him and to take care of him during this long trek over and back. He didn't see any way how the elderly man could do it on himself. We don't know that any of the elderly Brahmin's family members offered to help him. All we know is that he started out alone, and the young Brahmin came and offered assistance. So they made the journey together, and the young man was attentive to all the needs of the older man. He cooked the meals for him. He prepared his bed. He massaged his tired, aching legs after a long day of hiking. They went to Vrindavan, and they appeared before the Gopal deity there in one of the temples. By this time, the old man realized that he could never travel all this distance in such comfort without the selfless help of that young Brahmin. He thought, this man would be a great son-in-law. We're looking for a match for my daughter. I can't honestly think of anybody who would be a better husband and a better son-in-law, a better father than this young Brahmin. So before the deities, the elderly Brahmin said, I want you to marry my daughter when we get back to Vrindavan. And the younger man said, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your wanting to repay the humble and significant services I've done you, but I don't think your family will accept this proposal. They consider themselves a high-class Brahmin family, very wealthy, very affluent, very well connected, and they must undoubtedly be looking for somewhat of their own social class with whom to betroth your daughter. I myself, although I'm also a Brahmin, I'm very poor. I don't have the level of education. I don't have the social status. No, I don't think you should. I think you should retract this promise, especially seeing as how you articulate in front of the deity. No one in traditional India would ever make a promise or make a statement in front of the deity, which would later prove to be false. That would not bode well for their future. So the young Brahmin said, I think you should retract this promise, especially if it's made in front of the deity. But the older Brahmin was adamant. He said, no, it doesn't matter that you don't come from a social class, that you don't have the income or the education. You have good character. I've seen this myself every day, all day. I cannot do any better than to have you as my son-in-law. If my family objects, I promise I will convince them. I will convince them. And then the young Brahmin said, okay, well, as long as we're from the deity, and if you're determined, you might as well make it a formal statement in front of the deity. So standing there without any paper or pencil, we don't know if there were any other people in the temple room or not. Let's assume there were not. It's only the young Brahmin, the old Brahmin, and the Krishna deity there, big 1,000-pound stone deity of Krishna. The older Brahmin said, I promise that I will marry my daughter to this young Brahmin. Okay. The young Brahmin was just as attentive on the trek back, took care of all the needs of the older Brahmin. Finally arrived back, and the younger Brahmin went to his house. The older Brahmin went to his house. And after a few days, the older Brahmin gathered the family members together, his sons and daughters, his wife, and he said, this younger Brahmin treated me like a father. He went out of his way. He needn't have done any of it. He's so kind and so selfless, of such high-minded character, that he took care of me. Without him, I would hardly have been able to make that trek. I would not be alive and well before you today. In fact, he said, none of you cared to come with me. None of you cared to support me. None of you are interested in going to Vrindavan. You're all too caught up in your money-making, worldly, social circles. And so I want to give this Brahmin, I want to give my daughter in marriage to this young Brahmin. Well, as soon as the words got out of his mouth, not only did all the family members get extremely upset, they started raising their voices and shouting. And the Brahmin he hadn't been worried about convincing them to give his daughter to a man of high character. He hadn't been worried about that because he had all the logic, all the argument aside. But what he hadn't counted on was both his eldest son and his wife threatened to commit suicide if their daughter and sister was married to this Brahmin. They said they would give up their lives. The shame, they said, in our social circles would be so great that we wouldn't want to appear in public anymore. We would commit suicide. So at this point, the older Brahmin didn't know what to do. He became befuddled and confused. So he said, well, what am I going to tell the young Brahmin? He'll be here according to our arrangement tomorrow. And the older son said, you don't have to lie. We're not asking you to lie to him. But when he comes, let me do all the talking. You just be quiet. Don't confirm anything I said. Don't deny everything I say. Just remain uncommitted and mute. So the old Brahmin felt so bad, but what could he do? Everybody's threatening suicide. That's not a good thing. So the young Brahmin, according to a prearrangement, arrived for his appointment next day. And the older son stepped out quite aggressively, got in his face and said, what can we do for you? And the younger Brahmin said, your father has promised his daughter in marriage to me. And the older man started scoffing and scorning the young person, deriding him, insulting him. He said, my father could have never said anything like that. And the younger Brahmin said, he said it, but not only, I tried to talk him out of it, but he went in front of the deity and made a promise in front of the deity, and no promises in front of the deity can ever be broken. And the older son began to accuse the Brahmin of being a gold digger. You knew my father had money. You knew he was well connected. You knew he had a beautiful daughter. So you had this agenda. You had your own agenda all along, that you would worm your way into our family's high social circle. You're a rogue. You're a blackguard. And the young Brahmin said, well, these are certainly libelous statements. You're certainly making an assault on my character. But inasmuch as this statement was made by your father to the deity, I think that if you're going to make it necessary, I could bring the deity here to be a witness. Would you accept it if the deity arrived here and testified to the statements that your father made in front of him? Now, the oldest son was an atheist. He didn't believe in God. And so he agreed. He said, yeah, you bring your deity here. If the deity willingly comes here, then I'll submit to the proposal. And he thought there's no chance that 1,000-pound deity is going to walk. He thought the deity just made of stone, wood. He was an atheist. He was a materialist. He didn't have any interest in spiritual life. So he agreed. He thought this would get rid of the young Brahmin for good. He said, go and bring your Gopal deity. And then if he comes and testifies personally, then I'll give my sister in marriage to you. So having received this assurance, the young man retraced his steps. He went back another 1,000 miles to Vrindavan. He stood before the Gopal deity, huge stone deity weighing, half a ton. And he said, this is the situation. You know very well that the older Brahmin made this promise, and you know that when someone makes a promise to you, it has to be fulfilled. Otherwise, it's going to be a terrible thing. So the deity said, yeah, you're right. I was here. I remember that very distinctly. You tried to talk him out of it, but he insisted and he made that. So you're right. And so the young man said, okay, so we're in agreement. Let's go. I told him that I would bring you as a witness. And the deity said, what are you talking about? I'm a 1,000-pound deity. I can't walk with you 1,000 miles. I'm a stone deity. And this young Brahmin, because he was full of faith and he knew that God could do anything, he hadn't put any limits on God. He said, look, if you can talk, you can walk. So he had him there. He captured Krishna. And Krishna said, okay, but I'll come with you on one condition. I'll walk behind you. You'll know I'm behind you by the tinkling of my ankle bells, but you mustn't turn to look at me. If you turn to look at me out of distraction or curiosity, then I'll just stand there as a 1,000-pound deity and I won't take another step further. Young Brahmin agreed. So he turned around, he headed back for Vrindavan, step by step, 100 miles, 200 miles, 300 miles. He knew the deity was there behind him because he heard the tinkling of his ankle bells. They arrived all the way back to his village in Orissa. They were just on the outskirts of the village, and all the time he'd heard the tinkling of the Lord's ankle bells, which were maddeningly enchanting. It was all he could do not to turn around and drink in the supernatural, unlimited beauty of the Lord, but he couldn't stand it any longer. He'd reached the village. His purpose has been served. He turned around, saw the beautiful deity. Krishna gave him the most enchanting smile in all the material and spiritual world. He threw up his arms and laughed, and then he fixed himself to the ground as a 1,000-pound deity. But he was in the village, and the young man called all the village members, not just the relatives of the old Brahmin, the younger son, the wife, and the young daughter, not just them, but all the members of the village came there. And the entire village became witness to the fact that the Lord does not take a step without the sanction of his devotees. The Lord, who is totally independent, who causes everything but himself, is not caused. The Lord, out of fear of whom the seasons change, the sun rises and sets, the winds blow, the tides change, and out of fear of whom death himself changes everybody, that supreme independent Lord is subordinate to the will of his devotees. That Lord walked 1,000 miles with the young Brahmin in order to uphold the promise of the older Brahmin. So in the same way, Krishna is like the kite. It appears independent in the sky, but with a closer look, we see that the kite is controlled by the kiter, if that's what the name is, the person on the ground who controls, and the string which controls the kite are the names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Purnasudha Vidam Binat Mam Nami Namina. The name of Krishna is like Chintamani, which can turn iron into gold. Purnasudha Nitya Mukta. The name of Krishna is full of Krishna's spiritual potencies. It is pure, just like Krishna is pure, and has nothing to do with material, mundane vibrations of this world. It is eternally liberated. The name of Krishna is absolute, and being absolute, the name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. One can control the supreme, uncontrolled, independent personality of Godhead with the string of chanting the holy names of the Lord. Tomorrow we'll talk about how and in what mood and what are the techniques to chant in such a way that the independent Lord becomes dependent on the will of his pure devotees. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right. Thank you. Thank you for Brent, first one to jump on board. John Malik, second one. Sundari Priya, who's up to our neck in preparations for the Janmashtami celebration tomorrow in Salt Lake City. I'll be going up there today with the food trailer, some items from our freezer to help with the feast. Jean, Carmen, she says, thanks everyone for being here. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Bharat Patel, my new best friend from Calgary, Canada, president there. Admiram Das, thanks so much for joining us today. Krishna Das Tarachand has been a recent frequent participant. Shali, Hare Krishna Shali down there in Ephraim. Vaibhavi, who's also going up to Salt Lake City tomorrow to help with the food distribution. Carmen writes here a little bit more extensively in the comment section of Facebook. The stories of Hari will help you see what's meant to be. When Gajendra jauntily joked in the jaws of justice, he became proof of the truth. The crock that stops is actually the top, a call from him to give up sin. What do you think about that, Rob?
Wow, that was quite the lyricist there.
Yeah, she's got a talent just like you. Let me see if I still have this on the clipboard. Yep. Oh, no, I don't have it on the clip. I was going to paste the whole song, but I didn't. Well, let's read it once more for you, Rob. Okay, because I know you're not on Facebook. So Carmen writes, the stories of Hari will help you see what's meant to be. When Gajendra jauntily joked in the jaws of justice, he became proof of the truth. The crock that stops is actually the top, a call from him to give up sin. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Is awesome. That is awesome. We're going to have to go on stage, you and me and Carmen, one of these color fests, and combine our group lyrics and make a band, make a hip hop routine. By the way, we're going to Columbus, Ohio, for a Festival of Colors on the 16th of September. Quite excited about that. And lastly, yeah, Carmen says, absolutely, she's up for that. Okay. And it's interesting too, because when I went to Detroit a couple of weeks ago, a very nice, tall, good-looking, aristocratic, very wealthy. I think he's quite wealthy. His name was Advaita Pran. He'd been to Utah for the Sadhu Sangh. He knew me, and he knew about my rap songs. And he said, Charu, I've written a rap about book distribution. So even though we're right in the middle of starting the festival, he himself was manning a booth, heading up a booth, and I was on my way to the stage. I said, tell me. So he rattled off this rap that he'd written about book distribution. It was really good. It was really good. So maybe we have this subculture going of rhyme and poetry and raps, because it's a really concise, catchy, compelling way to present Krishna consciousness to people in general. So I will always encourage anybody to put together rhymes and raps. Good job. And speaking of all of that, and let me say also to Arun Thakur, good morning there, and Hare Krishna. Speaking of all that, let's turn to our rap meister, Rob, to see what you might have for us today.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, and Carmen is quite the alliterist. The alliteration she uses is pretty amazing.
Nice.
I think she's a bit better at that than I am, for sure.
Both of you are good. Everybody has their own unique style.
So, what the mundane like the least for a transcendentalist is a feast. When caught by the croc, Krishna should be sought.
Krishna should be what?
Sought.
Sought. Okay, yeah.
If you call out in true dependence, Krishna comes with assurance. Everything acts in fear, but to Krishna, the devotee is dear.
Oh, nice, nice.
You can be sure the holy name is pure.
Nice, very good, and very much to the point. Please do send this to me. I will post them. Tomorrow will be Janmashtami. I'll be up in Salt Lake City, but it shouldn't be a problem. We'll be busy all day, but I don't see any problem in our jumping on Zoom at 7:30 in the morning to share a few thoughts on the auspicious occasion of Krishna Janmashtami, the appearance of Krishna. So we won't be discussing Gajendra tomorrow, but we'll be discussing he who liberated Gajendra from the jaws of the crocodile with his Sudarsana chakra, and over and above that, liberated Gajendra from the jaws of ignorance of repeated birth and death. So I'll look forward to being with you tomorrow as I am physically in Salt Lake City. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.